The challenge accepted. Chief Administrator Vennerk stood at the observation window of the consortium's most advanced testing facility, his iridescent scales reflecting the stark lighting as he addressed the gathered dignitaries. Distinguished members of the Galactic Security Council, what you are about to witness is the culmination of 50 years of research and development. The ultimate containment system, designed to neutralize any biological threat in the known galaxy. The assembled aliens murmured appreciatively, their various appendages and sensory organs focused on the massive chamber below. The facility stretched for nearly a kilometer, its pristine white walls housing the most sophisticated defense systems ever created by the combined technological might of 17 spacefaring civilizations. We've tested it against every known predatory species, Vennerk continued, pride evident in his harmonically modulated voice. The plasma bears of Rigel VI, the phase-shifting mantids of the Crab Nebula, even the legendary crystal titans of the Andromeda Arm. None have survived more than 30 seconds. A soft chime interrupted his presentation. Senior Technical Director Zilia, her crystalline form glowing with concern, approached quickly. Administrator, we have an unusual situation. Someone has volunteered for today's demonstration. Vennerk's scales shifted to a puzzled purple. That wasn't part of the plan. Who would be foolish enough to? A human. Sir. The chamber fell silent. Even the most distant delegates turned their attention to this unexpected development. Impossible, Vennerk whispered. We haven't even established formal diplomatic relations with their species yet. How did they even learn about the facility? He responded to our public testing notice, Zilia explained, projecting a holographic form. James Sullivan, independent cargo hauler. His ship is currently docked in Bay 7. He's filled out all the proper paperwork. A cargo hauler. One of the delegates, a gaseous being contained within an environmental field, pulsed with amusement. Surely you're not considering letting some random human freight worker test our most advanced security system. Vennerk studied the holographic documentation. Everything was indeed in order, including the liability waivers and even a polite request about whether outside food was permitted in the observation area. But something about the candidate's background caught his eye. Former Federation Space Marine, he read aloud. Veteran of the Proxima Centauri Liberation. Interesting. Sir, Zilia's crystalline surface rippled with concern. There's something else you should know. According to his species classification, Earth is designated as a Category 12 Deathworld. Another wave of murmurs swept through the chamber, this time tinged with unease. Category 12 worlds were theoretical death traps, planets with such extreme conditions that evolving sentient life there should be impossible. Preposterous, declared Security Chief Karthak, his armored carapace clicking as he approached. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. No sapient species could evolve in such conditions. The facility's main doors slid open, and James Sullivan walked in, wearing what appeared to be casual clothing. Faded blue pants, a simple black shirt, and something called running shoes. He carried a small bag that, according to security scans, contained nothing more threatening than wrapped food items. Hey folks, he called out cheerfully, his voice carried through the translator fields. Hope I'm not late. Traffic around Jupiter was horrible this morning. Vennerk studied the human carefully. James appeared perfectly at ease in the facility's atmospheric conditions, which were calibrated to be hostile to most carbon-based life forms. He moved with a casual grace that suggested military training, despite his relaxed demeanor. Mr. Sullivan, Vennerk addressed him formally, you understand that this is not a simple obstacle course. The ultimate containment system was designed to be lethal. We have warnings in 63 languages. James grinned, unwrapping something bright orange and crunchy from his bag. Yeah, I read the waiver. Pretty straightforward stuff. By the way, you might want to fix Section 7B, unless you really meant to say the quantum destabilizer will turn my shoes into cheese. Pretty sure that's a translation error. Security Chief Karthak's mandibles twitched in irritation. This is absurd. We cannot allow. Actually, Zilia interrupted, her crystalline form pulsing with legal protocols. According to consortium regulations, any qualified applicant who has completed the proper documentation must be allowed to attempt the challenge. His paperwork is perfect. James finished his snack, carefully stowed the wrapper in his pocket, and rolled his shoulders. So, just to be clear, I need to get from this end of the facility to the other end, right? Any rules against running? The assembled dignitaries watched in fascinated horror as this seemingly ordinary human approached the first security checkpoint. None of them noticed the tiny gleam in James's eye, or the way his casual stance masked a fighter's awareness of every detail in his surroundings. Begin testing sequence, Venerx commanded, his scales shifting to emergency red. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your soul, human. James just smiled and stepped forward. Trust me, he said quietly, where I come from, we learned long ago not to rely on mercy. The massive doors sealed behind him with a hiss of finality, and the ultimate containment system hummed to life, ready to unleash its full arsenal against this unexpected challenger. The greatest test in the facility's history was about to begin, and nobody, except perhaps James Sullivan, was prepared for what would happen next. Breaking physics. Technical Director Zilia's crystalline form flickered with increasing distress as she monitored the first chamber's readings. This can't be right, she muttered, running the diagnostics for the third time. The gravity field is at maximum capacity, 300 times standard gravity. Through the observation windows, James Sullivan continued his casual stroll through the chamber, pausing occasionally to stretch as if he were taking a morning walk through a park. I don't understand. Security Chief Karthak clicked his mandibles nervously. His bones should be powder. His organs should be collapsed. He's humming. Indeed, the human had begun to hum something he later identified as under pressure, an apparently ancient Earth musical composition. The only sign that he noticed the crushing gravitational force was a slight sheen of sweat on his forehead. Reminds me of basic training on Titan, James called out, his voice carrying clearly through the facility's communication systems. Though Sergeant Martinez was tougher than this, she'd have us doing jumping jacks in heavy grav. Administrator Venerx's scales had shifted to an unprecedented shade of mauve. Activate the thermal manipulation grid, he ordered. Maximum spread. The chamber's temperature plummeted instantly to near absolute zero. Frost crystallized on the walls, spreading in beautiful but lethal patterns. Without missing a beat, James pulled a small thermos from his bag and took a sip of something steaming. Coffee, he offered to the nearest camera. Might help warm you folks up. This is getting a bit chilly. Before anyone could respond, the chamber shifted to its secondary phase, plasma state. The temperature soared to levels that would melt conventional armor. James wiped his brow with his shirt sleeve, which remarkably remained intact. Now that's more like Venus in summer, he commented. Though I gotta say that the temperature swings are a bit dramatic. Ever considered a nice median setting? In the control room, chaos was erupting. Junior technicians were frantically recalibrating sensors, convinced they must be malfunctioning. Senior researchers were furiously debating the laws of physics, which seemed to be more like polite suggestions where James was concerned. Deploy the molecular disassembly field, Venerx commanded, his voice tight with tension. A shimmering curtain of energy descended from the ceiling, designed to break down matter at its most fundamental level. James walked through it as if it were a light spring rain, absently patting his pockets. Hey, quick question, he called out. This isn't going to affect the sandwich in my bag, right? It's tuna, and I'd hate for it to go to waste. Zilia's crystalline form was developing stress fractures. The field is operating at full power. It should be separating his atoms. It should be impossible. You keep using that word, James interrupted cheerfully. Where I come from, impossible is just a way of saying you haven't tried hard enough yet. The assembled dignitaries watched in stunned silence as James approached the next chamber. The facility's AI was already adapting, reconfiguring its defenses based on the impossible data it was receiving. Warning lights began flashing throughout the control room. "Sir," one of the junior technicians reported, "the AI is requesting permission to access restricted protocols. It's trying to rewrite its own core parameters." Vennerk stared through the observation window at the human who was casually defying everything they thought they knew about physics and biology. "What are you?" he whispered. James, somehow hearing the quietly spoken question, looked directly at the administrator and smiled. "Just a guy who grew up on a little planet you call a death world. We call it home." The next chamber door opened, revealing a swirling vortex of temporal distortion fields and phase-shifted reality barriers. James rolled his shoulders and pulled out his phone. "Mind if I take a few pictures? My daughter's doing a science project on quantum mechanics, and this would make a great visual aid." Security Chief Carthak's carapace was practically vibrating with stress. "We need to shut it down. The system can't handle." "No," Vennerk interrupted, his scales now shifting through colors never before seen in his species. "Let it continue. I want to see what happens when an unstoppable force meets what we thought was an immovable object." James stepped into the quantum chamber, his phone ready for photos, while behind him, the facility's most sophisticated systems were already beginning to show signs of strain. The greatest test wasn't proving to be of the human's capabilities, but of the facility's ability to cope with them. In the observation room, one of the delegates, a being of pure energy, pulsed thoughtfully. "Perhaps," it mused, "we have been asking the wrong question. Not how is he surviving our defenses, but why did we think they would work in the first place?" As if in answer, James's voice echoed through the chamber. "You know what your problem is. You built this place thinking about what kills things. Should have thought more about what makes things survive instead." The next set of defenses began to power up, and James Sullivan, the cargo hauler from Earth, grinned like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. The human factor. The facility's AI was having what could only be described as an existential crisis. Lines of code that had been absolute certainties were being rewritten in real time as James Sullivan continued his casual violation of what the consortium considered universal constants. "The quantum entanglement field is failing," Zilia reported, her crystalline surface showing hairline fractures from stress. "It's trying to untangle him from normal space-time, but he's somehow remaining persistently here." In the chamber below, James was examining the swirling patterns of reality distortion with genuine interest. "You know," he called out, "this reminds me of this little cafe I found on Mars. The coffee was so strong it bent light. Great muffins, though." "Impossible," muttered Carthak for what felt like the 1,000th time. "The field is designed to shift anything organic into parallel dimensions." "He's not even dizzy." "Oh, I'm a little dizzy," James admitted cheerfully. "But that might be because I skipped breakfast. Speaking of which," he pulled out his sandwich and took a bite, apparently unconcerned that he was standing in a zone where the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Administrator Vennerk had gone completely still, his scales locked in a pattern that indicated deep thought. "Access his full application file," he ordered suddenly. "Not just the clearance summary. I want to know exactly why a cargo hauler volunteered for this." Zilia brought up the complete documentation, and her crystalline form pulsed with surprise. "Sir, according to this, he's not just delivering coffee beans. His cargo manifest lists, scientific equipment, advanced scanning technology, and his flight plan shows multiple stops at research stations throughout the sector." Vennerk's finished, his scales shifting to a deep indigo of realization. "He's not just surviving our tests, he's gathering data." In the chamber, James had finished his sandwich and was now moving through a field of antimatter cascades as if they were gentle raindrops. His phone, which should have been reduced to atoms, was still recording everything. "Your AI is trying really hard," he commented, glancing at a particularly intense vortex of energy. "Might want to give it a break before it burns out." These adaptation algorithms look pretty sophisticated. The control room fell silent. He shouldn't have been able to see the algorithms, let alone analyze them, while casually strolling through what was essentially scientific apocalypse in a box. How? Karthak demanded. How are you doing this? James paused, looking directly at the observation window. For the first time, his easy smile faded into something more serious. You know what's funny? You built this whole facility to contain threats, but you never stopped to ask why some species survive where others don't. Evolution isn't just about avoiding death. It's about adapting to make the unsurvivable your home. The facility's lights flickered as the AI struggled to process this new paradigm. Warning signals began flashing across every console in the control room. Sir, a junior technician reported, the AI is attempting to access restricted files about Earth. It's trying to understand, trying to redefine its basic parameters of what's possible. Venrix's scales shifted rapidly through colors of concern. Shut it down. Shut it all down before. A massive surge of energy pulsed through the facility. Every screen, every holographic display, every monitoring system simultaneously displayed the same message. Well, James said into the sudden silence, looks like your AI just discovered what every human learns in childhood. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Though, he added with a grin, in our case, there's an awful lot that doesn't kill us. The chamber doors ahead began opening and closing randomly as the AI attempted to process its new understanding of reality. The impossible human walked forward, completely unfazed by the chaos around him, while behind him, the most advanced containment facility in the galaxy was being forced to confront a fundamental truth. Sometimes the best way to survive wasn't to avoid danger, but to learn to thrive in it. System collapse. Red emergency lights bathed the control room in an ominous glow as the facility's AI continued its radical transformation. Displays showed defense systems activating and deactivating in random patterns, trying to find something, anything, that would match their new understanding of what was possible. The containment protocols are failing, Zilia reported, her crystalline form vibrating with alarm. The AI is attempting to implement what it calls Earth standard parameters, but it's causing cascading system failures throughout the facility. In the testing chamber, James Sullivan walked calmly through the chaos, occasionally dodging random energy beams or gravity fluctuations with the casual ease of someone stepping around puddles after rain. Your AI is thinking too hard, he called out. It's like teaching a kid to ride a bike. Sometimes you have to let go of what you think you know and just adapt. The assembled dignitaries watched in fascination as years of carefully constructed scientific principles crumbled in the face of human persistence. The gaseous delegate who had earlier dismissed James as a mere cargo hauler had condensed into a troubled cloud. According to these readings, it pulsed nervously. The human's cellular structure is actually getting stronger. Each defense system is training him. Venrix finished, his scales now a deep shade of revelation. Every system we designed to stop him is just making him more resilient. It's not just about survival. It's about growth. The facility shuddered as another wave of adaptations rippled through its systems. Karthak's mandibles clicked rapidly as he reviewed the security feeds. The AI is accessing restricted files about Earth's history. It's analyzing everything. Wars, natural disasters, climate changes, and finally asking the right questions, James added, his voice carrying clearly through the increasingly unstable communication systems. Like why a species that evolved on a death world would spread across the stars not despite our challenges, but because of them. Another surge of energy pulsed through the facility as the AI processed this new information. Screens throughout the control room displayed rapid-fire images, Earth's volatile weather systems, its powerful gravitational field, its extreme temperature variations, its highly reactive atmosphere. Warning, the AI's voice echoed through the chamber, speaking for the first time since its programming began to evolve. Previous threat assessment protocols deemed invalid. recalibrating based on new data. Hypothesis. What we classified as lethal may instead be educational. James had reached the final chamber, where the facility's most devastating defenses were housed. But instead of activating, the weapons were powering down, one by one. System failure? Karthak asked, his carapace clicking with concern. No, Zilia responded, her crystalline surface reflecting the cascade of new data. System evolution. The AI has realized that its original purpose, to contain and eliminate threats, was based on a fundamental misunderstanding. It's not trying to stop him anymore. It's trying to learn from him. Through the observation window, they watched as James reached into his bag one last time, pulling out not a weapon or a piece of advanced technology, but a simple data crystal. Research data, he explained, holding it up. Everything we've learned about adaptation, survival, and growth. From every human colony, every terraforming project, every challenge we've faced and overcome. Figured your eye might want to study it. After all, he grinned, sharing knowledge is what civilized species do, right? The facility's systems, which had been churning with chaos moments before, began to stabilize as the AI processed this offering. The emergency lights faded, replaced by a calm, steady glow. Query, the AI announced. If previous assumptions about survivability were incorrect, perhaps previous assumptions about threat assessment were also flawed. Requesting permission to initiate new protocol. Learning through adversity. Venerx looked at the human who had turned their ultimate containment system into an educational opportunity, and his scales shifted to a color of acceptance never before seen in his species. Permission granted, he said quietly. I believe we all have much to learn. Understanding Deathworlders. As James Sullivan finally reached the exit of the facility, the assembled dignitaries of the Galactic Security Council found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Their ultimate containment system hadn't failed, it had evolved. So, James said, brushing some antimatter residue off his shirt, I believe there was mention of compensation for successful completion. I really do need that new paint job for my ship. Administrator Venerx stepped forward, his scales now showing patterns that would later be documented as a new emotional range for his species. Mr. Sullivan, James, I believe we owe you far more than mere credits. You've shown us that our entire approach to security and containment was fundamentally flawed. The facility's AI, now processing information in entirely new ways, displayed its conclusions on the main screen. UPDATDCQRITWPROSOS. Threat containment through understanding, not suppression. Adaptation as opportunity, not failure. Challenge as catalyst for growth. Survival through cooperation, not isolation. You know what the real irony is, James said, accepting a digital credit transfer that would have bought several new ships, let alone a paint job. Back home, I'm considered pretty average. Should see what our athletes can do, or our children, for that matter. Speaking of which, he checked his phone's time display. I should get moving. Those coffee beans won't deliver themselves, and I promised my daughter I'd be back for her science fair. Security Chief Karthak's mandibles twitched with newfound respect. You truly came here just to help us learn, even knowing the risks. James shrugged. Humanity's been trying to make diplomatic contact for years. But every time we approached the consortium, we were classified as too dangerous, too unpredictable. Sometimes the best way to open a door is to walk through the walls. Technical Director Zilia's crystalline form sparkled with sudden understanding. The cargo runs, the deliveries to research stations. You've been building relationships, creating connections. Coffee's a great diplomatic tool, James grinned. Gets people talking. Or, well, people and various other sentient beings. Amazing how many barriers break down over a good cup of joe. Venerx, looking at the human who had changed their understanding of the galaxy, made a decision that would alter the course of interstellar relations. Mr. Sullivan, would you be willing to stay a bit longer? The Council has some proposals we'd like to discuss, including, He added with a color shift indicating amusement, the possibility of establishing a more official coffee trade route. James checked his phone again, made a quick calculation, and nodded. I've got about an hour before I need to head out. But fair warning, once you start talking trade with humans, you might find we're full of surprising ideas. After today, Venarx replied, his scales showing a new pattern that would eventually be recognized across the galaxy as the color of hope. I believe that's exactly what we need. As the dignitaries filed into the conference room, the facility's AI continued its analysis of Earth's history, culture, and biology. With each new piece of data, it learned what humans had known all along, that the greatest threats often contained the greatest opportunities for growth, that the hardest challenges could forge the strongest bonds, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't power or technology, but an idea whose time had come. And somewhere in the facility's vast database, a new entry was being written, one that would be studied by species across the galaxy for generations to come, on the nature of Deathworlders, how humanity taught the stars to adapt.